back into our database. And then the next step is kind of why everybody is here. Oops. Wrong direction. Is the field verification. Sometimes, as I mentioned before, you just can't tell if the wetland is a wetland on the photo, and so we mark those as for field verification. The other thing is to figure out how well we are doing. If we call it a shrub-scrub wetland, is it really a shrub-scrub wetland, or is it emergent, or is it forested? If we call the wetland, is it really a wetland? Those kinds of things. So what we're doing is we're taking a sample of those and going out and field verifying those sites, and then through this field verification process, figuring out if those wetlands are actually there, and coming back to the database, we can do an accuracy assessment on our photo interpretation. That's going to be put back into our database and then eventually sent to the Fish and Wildlife Service to put into the official national wetlands inventory. So what do we want to verify? First thing we want to do is we want to verify the accuracy of the wetland class. If we called it emergent wetland, was it emergent, or was it a shrub scrub, or was it forested? Just get a good feel of kind of how well we're doing as far as the wetland class goes. Second thing is to identify the wetland status. We would call it a converted wetland because of development. Was there actually development there, or did we just miss it? And there actually wetland is still there. Or if it was converted due to agriculture, is it actually being farmed? So we want to get a feel for how well we're calling those converted wetlands. And then the third thing is to verify those ambiguous wetlands when we can't really tell what it is from the photos. Have somebody actually go out and verify that it is a wetland. So how are we doing this? Basically what we're doing is we're selecting 2% of the wetlands in the field, or to be field verified, and hope to get half of those back. And so we've oversampled the wetlands, and I'll explain this more in detail later. But we don't expect, some of the wetlands we're not going to be able to get to because of private properties issues, or if you can't see it from the road, you just can't get access to the wetland. So we oversample the wetlands. So there's some wetlands we know we aren't going to be able to get to in the field. And that's just fine since we oversample them. So we select about 2% of the wetlands throughout all the counties, and we're trying to get 1% of them back. Kind of how we select them, that must be close to the road in order to be able to see it from the road. Stratified by group. Basically, this is in order for us to get enough samples and those converted. There won't be a lot of converted. Sometimes there will be, sometimes there won't be. But we want to have at least some samples and those converted. We also want to have some samples in each wetland class. We want to have some samples of open water, some samples of aquatic beds, some samples of emergent, shrub, and forested. And then basically they're just randomly selected throughout the county. And then we produce the field maps. There's a whole bunch of them on the back table that we'll go through. Basically this is what the field map looks like. We have the wetland identified here. We have the major roads labeled. We have two kind of inset boxes here with the general location within the county where it's at, and then a more specific location of where that wetland is, so that you can locate and get to the wetland. And then we have some other information down here to fill out as well. I'll go through this in more detail in just a little bit. We also have a volunteer database. Cindy's actually acting as our volunteer database for the Sierra Club. We're kind of organizing all you folks to do the field work, but in other states we haven't been quite as lucky. We basically have a database where people say that they're willing to volunteer for us, and we enter their information into the database. We figure out which counties they want to go to, and then fill out which counties they want to go to, which maps they've sent, which maps we received, just to kind of keep track of who's doing what counties, and so forth. So once we have all this information, we send it out to the field to volunteers. The volunteers go out and check it, take a photo of it. They send all this information back to us. And what we do with it after that is basically we go to our system, we add a point to where that photo was taken and a direction of the photo, and then it gets entered into our database. And we also enter the photo that was taken of that wetland into the database. So this is going to be a permanent record in the database, a point file. So it's going to be a historic, archived record of all the wetlands that we field visited. This information will also go to the Fish and Wildlife Service that they can put into the database. And this is going to be really important as well over time. In 10 years from now, we'll have this point database with field photos linked up so that if someone wants to go back to these photos and back to these sites and see what's changed over time. They have a permanent record of all these wetlands with an actual ground photo of the wetland as well.
Have you contacted the Farm Bureau or Soil Conservation in various states?
We have worked with them in some states. It's kind of hit or miss. We've advertised a little bit for field volunteers. Some states like the National Resource Conservation Service, Soil Conservation Service in Ohio, basically volunteered, and they had their field people go out and basically I think gather 10 to 15 wetlands per county throughout the whole state of Ohio. It kind of depends on who I can contact and what kind of advertisement we have out there. So, we have a big group of DU volunteers as well that have helped out on this project and will be helping out throughout the years as well. And then this, I'll just go over this real quick. Basically how we come up with an assessment table is we have a table here. So this is what we called it from the photo interpretation. We call it a PEM in the field. They call it a PEM. You don't have to worry about the codes, we'll deal with that. Basically it's an emergent class. You call it an emergent class for the photo. They call it an emergent class out in the field, so it was the correct classification. In some cases we'll call it emergent. In the field we'll call it shrub scrub. And so we didn't quite get that one right. And so basically we're going to build this database of all these points that you field verify in the field, and so we can come up with an accuracy assessment of how well we did in the photo interpretation. So in the end, we're going to say, well, for these emergent classes, we got 80% of them right. 10% we called emergent, they called shrub scrub in the field. Another 10% they may have called open water. So we're not going to, it's not perfect. Air photo interpretation is not perfect, but this will give the people using the data some kind of gauge on how well we call things emergent, shrub scrub, forested. So that when they do their analysis, they can have some confidence in actually using the data. Last thing we'll do is we're going to change the shape based on the field verification process. We'll also change the attribute to what they called it in the field, so we have an accurate assessment, of that wetland based on the field verification. Once all that's done and gets wrapped up, we're going to send that back to the Fish and Wildlife Service, and they'll incorporate it into the database and it'll be available through the national map and through the Fish and Wildlife Service national inventory as well. The mapping results of this will produce maps similar to this, so you can see the changes over time. Basically, the blue areas are all the wetlands that haven't changed from the original 1980s assessment from the Fish and Wildlife Service. The red ones are the ones that have been converted. This is Lake County, by the way. Based on development here, most of this area has been developed and the loss due to development. And then there's also additional wetlands or wetlands that have changed over time. This one was originally here and it's gotten bigger, changed class. So this is the kind of information that we're going to be producing at the end as well, so people can view the changes of the wetlands. Just another example, again in Lake County. Of the different wetlands, the red areas are all the ones that have been converted. The blue are the ones that were originally there in the 1980s, and the other ones have either been added or modified over time. Yeah.
What are you going to do about, let's say, detention basins that were possibly constructed wetland detention basins?
Yes, those will be mapped. The Fish and Wildlife Service maps basically any wetland, including open water detention ponds. So those are part of the inventory. Those wetlands, as I'll show them actually in the next slide, have a different code that we use. There's a little X code in the classification. Again, you're not going to need to know that. But we can pull those detention ponds out, those excavated ponds out of there, so we know which ones have been excavated like that and has a different habitat quality rather than actual restored wetlands or original wetlands. So those will be mapped, but they have a different code, so we can identify those as well. This is Lake County, some preliminary results that we've received. This is based on acres, and this is basically cluster and forested